afternoon or good morning, everybody. I'm Jim Werbaneth. I am an assistant professor of political science at American Public University System, which also includes American Military University, and an adjunct at the University of Arizona Global Campus, where I teach social science, and I used to teach American government when they offered a basic American government course. I have my master's degree in political science from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, my hometown. I believe black and gold. And I earned my second master's in military history, concentrating on World War II at American Military University. Now, this project goes back to 2015 when I was doing graduate work at AMU. And this is from a course that I took and then later taught at the undergraduate level on American diplomatic history. And my paper was called In Search of an Ally, the United States and France in World War II. We think of France as being our oldest ally, a country that is culturally kind of related to us, except for all the different types of cheese maybe in the metric system. But they also seem to run on a different standard of time and punctuality. Well, basically kind of like us. It's not like dealing with China or Japan, as relatives of mine have over the years. But still, our relations with France were very problematic, resulting even in a very short, nasty shooting war in North Africa. This was largely because the United States did not really know who to deal with in France. For the British, it was pretty clear. For the United States, no. Problem is, who are you going to deal with? France signed an armistice with Germany on the 22nd of June, 1940, which I just realized was 84 years ago tomorrow. And as a result, they ceded to German occupation the better parts of France, including Paris and their entire English Channel and North Atlantic coastlines, which became very useful as U-boat and air base areas. But the U-boat bases there were extremely useful. Brest had a dock that could accommodate Nazaire had a dock that could accommodate the SS Normandy, and therefore would have been useful for the Bismarck and Tirpitz. Germany definitely got the better part of this deal. This is what happens when you win. France was truncated down to the unoccupied Vichy area here, which was basically a German client state. And there was, I don't want to say it was a fiction that France was independent, but they were not truly independent. Now, the British reaction to this, one of the reactions was Operation Catapult, in which the Royal Navy took over as many French ships as they could in British harbors, and also sent a fleet under Sir James Somerville to attack Mers el-Kabir. This was the main French base in North Africa, and they gave them an ultimatum: either come with us, join the Allies, scuttle your ships, or go to the West Indies and disarm. Well, the French didn't get the last part. They were deeply offended by the first two, so they shot back. And the French fleet was basically crippled. One battleship exploded, and they had casualties that were not quite comparable with Pearl Harbor, but they came pretty close and definitely left a black mark on Anglo-French relations. In the midst of all this, one French general, Charles de Gaulle, declared himself the leader of the Free French forces. He was not going to surrender. Think Marshal Blucher against Napoleon. He was irredeemable, uncompromising. He wasn't going to listen to the French state in Vichy. He was going to keep on fighting. Of course, France supported him from the beginning. Even in 1940, they supported an attempt by de Gaulle to attack Dakar in West Africa. It wasn't successful, but they joined up with de Gaulle for armed conflict with Vichy right away. Not to mention the Rome conflict in North Africa and Operation Catapult in British ports. As a result, Vichy condemned de Gaulle to death in absentia. He did not come back to put himself before that sentence, and he became their bitter enemy. First American choice to deal with in France was Marshal Philippe Pétain. He represented continuity with the Third Republic. He was the established legal French government. He became a sort of an autocratic, authoritarian, lackluster dictator, and he was very reactionary with some elements of cult personality. The fact was, Pétain was a hero of World War I. He was regarded as the savior of Verdun. He was the commander who took over the French army in 1917 after the Nivelle offensive, when the French army started mutinying against its leaders. They were sick and tired of dying for nothing, in vain, bad tactics, lots of death. They mutinied. Pétain put it down in a very measured way, very wise way. He hanged some of the ringleaders, pardoned the rest, and then improved conditions for the French army. It was a combination carrot and stick, which he did very well. Well, Ferdinand Foch might have been the generalissimo of all the Allied armies. Pétain was very effective in bringing the French back to participate in 1918's offensives. He had a really stupid slogan too. Rick Atkinson in An Army of Dawn just calls it insipid, and I tend to agree with him. Travail, famille, patrie. Work, family, fatherland. Yeah, that's going to stir a lot of people. And they used to plaster on buildings with his portrait, and it was kind of dumb. It was like the, can't use the R word, but the developmentally challenged cousin of Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer. And it's like, this is the best you can come up with? Okay. And here we have Pétain shaking hands with that nasty Mr. Hitler. And the guy in the middle was Paul Schmidt, who was Hitler's interpreter. Well, Pétain was basically a puppet of Hitler. And this was one reason why de Gaulle, being uncompromising, was so much. And by the way, there's a personal element too, because they have been friends before, during the interwar era. And de Gaulle had ghostwritten a book for Pétain. Pétain took all the credit. And that led to a breakdown in their personal relationship. But de Gaulle had originally been mentored by Pétain. Now, here's where the Americans come in. Bill Leahy. Admiral William Leahy, one of my favorite characters you don't hear about in World War II. Look. He was a very good friend of Franklin Roosevelt. Roosevelt trusted him, and he tasked him with being the American ambassador to Vichy, which was really kind of a trip because Vichy was not equipped to be a site of a national government, let alone a diplomatic presence. Vichy is a resort where people went to take the waters. So there's lots of hotels, there are some villas, but it's not Paris. Everything is on a shoestring here. Leahy takes this very difficult job, takes his wife over, and she's very sick. She actually dies in Vichy, France, while he is ambassador. He has a very solid career as a naval officer. He was the commander of the Pacific Fleet. He was chief of naval operations before the war. He was also governor of Puerto Rico. This guy has a hell of a resume. He's got a lot of diverse experience, including executive experience in Puerto Rico. He has the president's trust and confidence. I can think of very few people who would have made a better ambassador than Bill Leahy. Later on, he became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the first modern White House Chief of Staff. So he not only does a good job at whatever he does, he invents the job. He goes in, he does it. And he also writes one of the better memoirs of World War II called I Was There, which he was. He also chaired the combined Chiefs of Staff when they met in Washington. This is a guy who was involved in everything and did it very well. Before before and after his assignment to Vichy. So he's a guy that you can really trust. Here's his mandate. Maintain good relations with the French state in Vichy. Second, prevent this guy, Pierre Laval, from being included in the government. Laval had a terrible reputation. Why he called him Black Pete. He was very pro-German, very in favor of collaboration with Germany. More so even than Pétain. And the United States made it very clear if Laval entered government, the United States would break off relations and go home. Now, Laval is kind of interesting because he starts off as a very, very committed left-winger before World War I, and he moves steadily to the right. Now, Julian Jackson, who wrote a very good book on Pétain's trial after the war, says that Laval wanted peace above all else. He wanted peace with Germany. He was willing to pay any price, including allowing the Holocaust to proceed in France. I mean, I consider him almost like the guy who's trying to keep the lifeboat afloat. And if he has to throw Jews off the back end of the lifeboat, he's going to be throwing Jews off the lifeboat to the sharks and to Klaus Barbie. Definitely not a good look for him. And he's not real popular in a lot of circles. As you can see, he's kind of an ugly dude. And kind of noxious, and the United States regards him as a red line. You put him in the government, we break off relations, Bill Leahy comes home. Now, Laval was named Prime Minister on the 18th of April, 1942. Bill Leahy goes home. One thing I have to say too about Giraud, but Pétain, this applies to today. There's still a lot of debate about Pétain's mental capability. Leahy thought he was senior. The first time he met him, he said, "This is a sharp guy." I don't think he ever said it again. Now, Julian Jackson says that Pétain was sharp right up until the end, all through his trial in 45. That's a view that I'm not sure I agree with. I tend to side with Leahy that Pétain was scatterbrained, inattentive, detached, easily manipulated, and senile. One thing that I heard out of the French people, is that Pétain had a very deliberate way of speaking. They thought he was very grandfatherly and wise because he spoke slowly. He was considering every word. One interpretation of that is he's senile and he couldn't think of the words. I think at this point Pétain is senile. I think he's totally off with the fairies and demented. And therefore he can be manipulated by people like Laval. So, the United States can't deal with him. Instead, we turn to a general named Henri Giraud. Like Pétain, Giraud was a career soldier. He was a hero and widely regarded as such. He actually escaped German captivity twice. He got away from a German POW camp in World War I. He escaped German captivity in World War II, went off to his house in Vichy, France, and lived there freely without Pétain arresting him. And, this is like the breakout king. And the Americans really like him. They think he's a hero. This is someone we can deal with. They thought, too, that he could appeal to Vichy soldiers and officers outside of France, particularly in North Africa. We think of North Africa, chiefly Algeria. Algeria at this point is not really a colony of France. It is a part of France. Ici la France. Definitely. This is part of the metropole. It may have a majority Arab population, but this is part of France. And they think that the garrison in Algeria is going to love Giraud. He didn't. He did not appeal to them. He's irritating, self-important. He is, at this point, they think he's resisting the established legal authority of Pétain. they're just like, do what you're told, don't question orders. Giroux is not really good at that. He's not good at following orders. And he's also, I think he's a little bit crazy. First time he met Eisenhower talks about it in his book, Crusade in Europe. Eisenhower is sick, he's got bronchitis. At this point, he's still a chain smoker, hence the heart attacks and stroke when he was president, although he had quit by then. He's in a damp, cold tunnel in Gibraltar. They bring in Giroux. Eisenhower's been working like 20 hours a day on Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa. Giroux says, I want to lead it. I just got here, but I want to lead it. Why? On that. Honor demands that I lead the invasion of Algeria. Eisenhower was a great diplomat, but I think that this tried his skills to the very edge of the ragged edge of salmon. So they kind of got him on deck, but first they got to deal with this guy. Not a general, Admiral Jean-Francois Darlan. He just happened to be in Algeria visiting his son during Torch. He's in Algiers, his son is dying of polio. This actually gives the Americans a little bit of an advantage with him because Franklin Roosevelt understands. Franklin Roosevelt also understands the Warm Springs Resort for polio victims in Georgia. He's a frequent visitor. In fact, he bought it. So we have some common ground with them all personally, and that can be used. He's also the commander of the French Navy under Vichy. He hates the Brits. Why? Well, first of all, two reasons. He's French. Is that enough? No. We're self-convened.
Yeah.
So the British sunk the ships. He's not happy. 1,300 almost dead French sailors. He's less happy. He also, to my professional view, he's not an arch collaborator and collaborationist collaborator the way that Laval was. He's an opportunist. This guy's amoral. He's loyal to himself. He may be loyal to the Navy, and he's looking for opportunity. His opportunity is he just happens to be in Algeria. Now, he has preliminary negotiations with French officers, and the Americans do too. This is led by my least favorite American general, Mark Wayne Clark. There are many reasons to hate Clark. Let me count the ways. One of the things I really dislike about him is he's secretly Jewish and he hides it. In his absolutely terrible autobiography, Calculated Risk, he has John MacDonald write the introduction, and he mentions Clark's parents, and he talks about his mother. She's a beautiful woman of Eastern European heritage named Rebecca Ezekiels. Now, if you know anything about Jewish law and practice, two things can make you Jewish. One is
Your mother or conversion?
well, conversion, that's the tough one.
Or
The
your
easy
mother's
way is to have your mom being Jewish. Now, Rick Atkinson talks about Mark Clark going to West Point, and when he goes in, he has this huge conversion ceremony to Episcopalianism in the chapel. Very ostentatious because he sees being an Episcopalian as a career move. This puts him into the center of the officer corps, and he's not alone in this. There are other guys too. Rick Krulak was a very important Marine officer who converted to Episcopalianism from Judaism. He told everybody he was an Episcopalian from Denver when he was a Jew from Wyoming. And he's so convincing, two of his sons become Episcopal priests. One becomes Commandant of the Marine Corps and a born-again Christian. Now, one of the older sons who became a priest is showing the great church he has in Hawaii to one of his cousins, and the cousin says, "What's a nice Jewish boy like you doing in a church like this?" But this is par for the course at the time. A lot of officers deal with anti-Semitism by avoiding being Semites. Hyman Rickover became became a Unitarian. But he still referred to Annapolis as an anti-Semitic little boys' school. He was proud of his heritage, but he made that compromise. Clark is one of them. I think Clark has, he's lacking in a lot of ways, one of which is integrity, one of which is loyalty. I think he's very self-serving. He's also a racist. You can read that in Calculated Risk, where he talks about maybe we can integrate the Army when the blacks get to be smart enough to serve the whites. He's writing this like in 1947. Yeah, not a good one. But he negotiates with the French in North Africa, along with Bob Murphy, a diplomat, who is the American consul in Algiers, later goes on to become one of the best of the brightest of the Vietnam War. Clark operates secretly, dealing with French officers, and he operates from a British submarine. At one point, hides in the basement to keep away from the cops. He swims out, he goes back to the submarine, and he loses his pants on the way. And he leaves not just his pants, but a money belt full of gold he was going to use for bribes. That's laying in the Mediterranean. Now, losing your pants swimming out to the submarine, this reminds me of the words of Homie the Clown. Dignity. This ain't it. Clark is one of my least favorite people, and I don't think he's a great diplomat in this. My personal opinion, Patton was a much better diplomat. Patton was a little crazy, of course, but he was also fluent in French, dealt very well with the upper classes because he was one. This is a guy who went to Hawaii for the Army, and when he was stationed out there, he went over, he sailed his yacht himself, and he sent his polo ponies on another ship. Definitely not a poor man. But Darlan is the opportunist. He's very important. And the first French reaction to Operation Torch is to shoot. Some historians, especially Gerhard Weinberg, have brought this up, that the French sense of honor meant that after the armistice in 1940, they fought basically everyone, everywhere, except the Germans, the Italians, and the Japanese. So they get into a shooting match with the British and the Americans. They try to hide the British involvement, it's really a very small thing where you're trying to pretend it's all America, hence Eisenhower commanding the operation. It doesn't work, they shoot back. And Darlan is an Algerian. They negotiate with Darlan to have the French capitulate. This works. And this is part of where Patton comes in. Not only do they capitulate, they join the Allies. They're Vichy, but they're on our sideline. And they fight for the rest of the war. Now, this is all very embarrassing because Darlan's character is rather transparent. With de Gaulle, with Pétain, you can say maybe they were loyal to France. With de Gaulle, you can say he's definitely loyal to France. Darlan is loyal to himself. Now, this isn't going to end well for him. On Christmas Eve, 1942, he's shot to death outside of the church in Algiers. It's by a 20-year-old French monarchist. Now, tell me if this does not breed conspiracy theories. Darlan gets killed on Christmas Eve. They have the trial on Christmas Day. Day after Christmas, he gets executed. No conspiracy there. Oh no. I actually think that maybe the assassin was put up to it by Churchill. It's just the kind of ruthless, dirty tricks that Churchill would have indulged in. And nobody really minds. I mean, it's the end of the embarrassment. Goodbye, Admiral Darlan. Now we can move on. So we get back to Vichy. When the Americans attack North Africa, the British attack North Africa, the Germans invade Vichy France on 11 November 1942. They basically drive right to the Mediterranean coast, take everything, including the naval port of Toulon, where the French Navy does scuttle. And the Vichy government is basically over in France. Now they go to Germany, and have all spent the rest of the war in Germany, which kind of shows their, I don't know whether their loyalty or the fact that they saw that that's where the bread was buttered. But they stayed in Germany for the rest of the war. So who does this leave? Charles de Gaulle, our partner by default. Not because we love de Gaulle, he's really the last man standing. Now, he is accepted very early by Winston Churchill, because he's gonna fight. Churchill fights, de Gaulle fights. They both hate the Germans, they both wanna win, they both wanna put Hitler down like a mad dog. Great, this is a convergence of interests. And you know, like I said on Babylon 5, I believe it was Ambassador Jakar said it. There are three forces that drive the universe: matter, energy, and enlightened self-interest. And by the way, this is something that I've always taught in my foreign policy and diplomatic history courses. And sometimes students argue whether it was Jakar or Wanda that says it, but in any case, Michael J. Straczynski wrote the line, and it applies here. Here we're seeing a convergence of interest between de Gaulle and the British. Not because they love each other, not because they want to have each other's babies, but because they have a common interest in defeating Hitler and liberating France. Now, in de Gaulle's case, liberating France is right close to the top. He is an uncompromising French patriot. Pétain, you can argue about. Laval, you can say he isn't. Darlan, you call him an opportunist, even though he's wearing a French uniform. I firmly believe that de Gaulle would have thrown himself in front of a bus for France. He would have thrown a lot of other people first, but he would have gone in front of the bus for his patrie. He is despised by Vichy, and his old men are attacked. He's a traitor. And this is the way things work sometimes. You're the patriot, you're called a traitor. We saw the Spanish Civil War where the Republican government, when after the war, the losers were tried as traitors by Franco, who was the rebel. That happens. Problems though, he's not very good at coalition warfare. Understatement of the day. He does not get along with others. He's supported by Churchill though, and he's introduced to the other allies, namely Roosevelt, at the Casablanca Conference in January 1943. Now, he is invested with a political role with the Free French. He is the political boss at this point. He's a soldier, but he is the political leader of the group. Giraud, whom I managed to misspell here, no matter how many times I proofread this, Giraud becomes the military chief. Nice compromise. Now, de Gaulle, going into 1944, becomes unchallenged. And here you see his flag, the French flag with the cross of Lorraine put on it. The cross of Lorraine becomes the symbol of the Free French to distinguish them from work, family, country, and all that other stuff with Pétain, and also Vichy, and also the characters in that. Giraud ends up getting fired. Reason why, first of all, he supported the resistance in Corsica and sent a couple of destroyers to help him on his own, never told anybody. Whoops. He also built an intelligence system of his own independent of the larger Free French organizations. So he's got his own private spy agency going on, which doesn't bode well with others. Now, if you think that de Gaulle is egotistical, I think Giraud is, he's almost in the hold my beer category. Yeah.
Quite achievement.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's amazing. You've got Churchill, you've got de Gaulle, you've got Roosevelt, and Patton, and this guy's egotistical. Whoa, that's an achievement. Now, this leaves de Gaulle unchallenged. He is supremely egotistical and irritating, as he will be for the next 30 years. Well, actually, until 69, and the reason why he stops being egotistical and irritating is because he stops breathing. He's the man, though, the go-to guy that France turns to in times of crisis again and again. Now, Churchill is supposedly said, the heaviest cross that I have to bear is the cross of Lorraine. This cross, the cross of de Gaulle. And in some ways, I can really understand de Gaulle. He's a patriot. He does not play well with others, but he is supremely dedicated to France. He has a hard time subordinating French interests and integrating them with those of Britain and the United States. But at the same time, he's doing the best he can with a very weak deck of cards. France is defeated. France is shamed. France has a collaborationist government in Vichy until the end of '42, when the Germans finally take over. The French Sûreté, the police, cooperate with the German authorities in deporting Jews for the Shoah, which I think is one of the most evil things that the French did in World War II. But you can't really top that. Collaboration with Germany, that's bad. Collaboration with the Holocaust is several times worse. And this is one of the things that comes up in Pétain's trial. And I think that France has never really examined this sufficiently. With the Germans, what the Federal Republic of Germany has done a great job of saying, mea culpa, we did it. East Germany never did. East Germany, the German Democratic Republic, said, we were victims of the Nazis. These Nazis came out of nowhere, took over our country, nobody supported them, the victims were all us.
And they used several Nazis to rebuild their apparatus after the war.
Oh yeah, and a lot of people did. So did NATO.
Yeah, yeah.
With Reinhard Gehlen. Oh, thank you. Cool. I get swag. But but France has always kind of built this myth since World War II that all they did was fight the Germans, except that they were fighting the British, the Americans, anybody else. Like Gerhard Weinberg said, thousands of French soldiers could land in Tunisia without stubbing a toe. The Americans landed in Algiers, and in Algeria and Morocco, they get shot at. But this is France kind of playing with history. Now, this is something we wouldn't believe today, but de Gaulle was regarded as possibly pro-communist, maybe even one himself. I tend to think of de Gaulle as pretending to be the last of the Bourbon case. Maybe he wants to be Holy Roman Emperor in the reincarnation of Charlemagne, I don't know. But his contemporaries thought he might be a communist. Here's why. He was indiscriminate about whom he had as allies. Then against over the other allies. Britain and the United States supported communists. We supported Tito in Yugoslavia against the Chetniks. We supported Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. And the reason why, we had one standard. Whoever was killing the most Germans, Italians, and Japanese was going to be our favorite friend. De Gaulle is kind of the same way. He even sends a free French fighter squadron, the Neiman Normandy Air Regiment. He sends them to Russia to fight in the Army Group North Sector in Baltics. They fly under Soviet command. They're flying Soviet aircraft. They have the cross of Lorraine next to the Red Star and the fuselage. They're not communists. They're just fighting alongside the Russians. He wants allies. And this is something the smart people do. Nelson Mandela has some of the worst allies you could ever believe. I mean, he had Yasser Arafat as an ally. He had East Germany. He had Libya. It was a general, the South African Communist Party, Joe Slovo. He had an absolute rogues gallery of rotten allies, but he needed it to win. And who could be a more unworthy ally of the United States than Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union? By the way, this is a little bit of trivia for you. Stalin killed more Jews than Hitler. The difference was Hitler was trying. Stalin was killing communists and he was killing enemies, and he just happened to kill a whole lot of Jews in the process. And he was also very anti-Semitic, which is strange because he was a Georgian. Georgia does not have a strong tradition of anti-Semitism. The Caucasus is one of the few places that doesn't. I've known Jews from there. Russian Jews from Grozny. One guy said he left, his family left Chechnya only when the radicalized Muslims, thanks to the Saudi missionaries, started spraying swastikas on his dad's door. Then they said it's time to go to Pittsburgh. So Stalin becomes very anti-Semitic as he becomes more and more Russian, as opposed to being a Georgian. And this is something that we see all through the war, by the way. We see anti-Semitism by everyone. Atkinson talks about the Casablanca Conference when Churchill and Roosevelt said, yeah, this is great. We can finally get these North African Jews to do some useful work. Giraud wants to keep in all the racial laws that Vichy had put in at the behest of the Germans that discriminated against Jews in Africa. And by the way, Algeria had a fairly large Jewish population at the time. So we see anti-Semitism all over the place. But de Gaulle, to get back to de Gaulle and the communists, Bill Leahy insists the guy is a communist or at least a sympathizer. But then again, he had communists in his, and under the Free French, there were some of the most effective resistance organizations. Of course he's going to have them as friends. Of course he's going to have them as subordinates. But he's unchallenged in 1944. We've got de Gaulle and we've got nobody else left. This is the end result. Charles de Gaulle and summer 1944 having his victory parade through Paris past the Arc de Triomphe. And by the way, this demonstrates de Gaulle's personal, moral, and physical courage. Something else I have to credit him with. There were still German and pro-German snipers in the city. And there he is walking out without any body armor, without riding a vehicle. Here I am shooting. This is not the act of a bloody kite. This is de Gaulle the soldier. This is de Gaulle the patriot. I cannot fault him for his physical and moral courage. A lot of other people in World War II I can. Lloyd Friedendahl looked him up. But de Gaulle ends up as the supreme leader in France after it's liberated. He becomes the power. He becomes the man who is, and also even after this, he is the man that France turns to in time of crisis, especially during the Algerian War. He's the last man standing. He wins. Any questions? Yeah.
Just on the U.S. ambassador, I forgot his name already.
Bill Leahy.
Okay. So how long was he actually stationed in Vichy? Like, I mean, how soon after the fall of France and the establishment of Vichy did we send a?
He was there for
ambassador?
close to 2 years,
Okay.
and he came out in the spring of '42.
Two questions, actually.
Sure.
The first question is, when the Germans defeated France, why did they actually allow Vichy to exist instead of just conquering the whole thing? So they just incorporated Norway, they incorporated the Netherlands.
Right.
Why didn't they just incorporate all of France from the beginning?
First of all, they didn't have the troops to occupy Vichy.
Okay.
In fact, they demobilized a lot of their army after the fall of France, thinking the war was basically over. And what they did have, they wanted to commit against Britain. Leaving Vichy alone lessened the burden on Germany. And then they could invade anytime they wanted, which they did. But they had bigger fish to fry at this point. France was neutralized. This is a frequent theme in German foreign policy going back to Bismarck. Isolate and neutralize France. This was Bismarck's #1 priority. Hence his alliance with Russia, the Franco-Prussian War.
Oh, yeah.
Everything was about this.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with that, but I guess just, especially going into Hitlerian inclination, you just eat, I mean, they ate all of Poland, they ate all of Norway. Why did Vichy get that temporary reprieve, I guess? Does that make sense?
Also, they didn't eat all of Poland. They gave a good chunk of it to the Soviets.
Well, that's true.
And,
Well,
it's
the
still part of Ukraine and Belarus.
Yeah, but in terms of, a nominally independent state, that, kind of thing, that,
Economy of force.
so is that their?
That's the
reason they
#1
did it?
priority as I see it.
Okay.
That if you have a pliant, client state. That's cool. And it wasn't the only place they did it. They had a client state in Slovakia they did not absorb after they took Bohemia, Moravia. Guy was a priest. Yeah. They also had allies who were not just nominally independent, they were independent. Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Finland.
True. Yeah.
The Nazi beast at this point wasn't eating all of its prey. You could even say they were saving it for later. And France was a big part of that. The thing is, too, the Germans were not all powerful. They did not have massive amounts of resources like the Soviets of the United States. They had to be careful with what they used and where they used it. Why commit troops to occupy southern France when you could have the French occupy southern France and send reparations to Germany? It becomes almost like a profit center at that point.
Okay.
And this is part of, well, it wasn't just they weren't eating Vichy France, they were exploiting it. And increasingly too, they exploit it for labor. Have the French send Frenchmen to Germany to work for free as slave laborers. Yeah, and they're more devious sometimes than we give them credit for. Doesn't make them any less evil, maybe makes them worse. I
Yeah.
mean, they didn't get where they were at, the Nazis did not get where they were at by being stupid. If they were stupid, they would have collapsed in 1941 maybe, or 42. But they were actually a bit smarter than that.
At what point did the U.S. government actually withdraw recognition from Vichy and give the official recognition to the Free French?
Well, there was sort of a gap in there between when we withdrew.
We no longer recognize our
diplomatic
embassy here, and
relations.
we're opening an embassy with these guys. What point did we do that?
We started recognizing de Gaulle at the Casablanca conference in '43.
Okay.
He became the political head of the Free French. And this was not unprecedented. We were also dealing with the Free Dutch government, not the Free Belgians because the king stayed in the country. But the Dutch government got out ahead of the paratroopers and went to England and then Canada.
Government exile.
Yes. In fact, as I understand, the later Queen of the Netherlands was born in a hospital in Toronto. In order to make it all legal, they took the hospital room and made it sovereign Dutch territory.
Really?
Yeah, they still have a Dutch flag outside the room.
They do.
Yeah, but this is something, I'm not sure how it is. I've heard it from Dutch people in the Netherlands. But we were dealing with a free Dutch government. We were dealing with a free Norwegian government, which was very patriotic. Dealing with de Gaulle wasn't that much different. And Pétain at this point was totally discredited. Darbois was discredited. So it was an easy decision. Now, on this, I have to make some talk about some sources. There are tons of primary sources you can get. Everybody in Stog wrote a book. Churchill, Eisenhower, Clark. Clark's book is the worst of the bunch. Leahy's is one of the best. I think as for secondary sources, Rick Atkinson's An Army of Dawn is very good. Time has some articles about big revelation. Pétain helped the Germans persecute Jews, which comes from, that's news for the Ministry of No Shit Sherlock. By the way, personal connection, I'm not a member of the tribe.
Okay.
My girlfriend is, and her family is basically my second family.
Okay.
So this is important to me. I don't make any pretensions of being Jewish.
Okay.
But, just,
Khashoggi-
I'm not a member of the tribe, but I'm a friend of the club.
Khashoggi Shehud.
What's that?
I thought you were Jewish, but what?
Well, like my mom said, I came home from school one day and said, you know, people think I'm Jewish. And she said, there are worse things to be called. Because I grew up in a house where there was no anti-Semitism, especially when, well,
If you
my
would
mom
like-
was very opposed to it. She grew up in a very mixed neighborhood, Morningside in Pittsburgh.
If you would like to join us, we'd be happy to have you.
That's what my girlfriend said. I said,
You're certainly welcome.
hey, I like bacon too much. But, yeah, just consider me a friend of the club.
Well, I appreciate that, especially in this day and age where it's
Yeah, and,
not
I
the
mean,
most popular group in the face of all of human history.
I was gonna wear my Mossad t-shirt today, but, instead I'm wearing KK's Priest from one of my favorite metal bands.
Okay.
But I was wearing my Mossad t-shirt, believe me, I've tangled with anti-Semites on social media. They also tend to be members of the Cooper fan club.
Ugh,
Well, while you're screwing up, let's do it twice.
Yankees.
But going on to the references, these are good. Eisenhower's Crusade in Europe. Jonathan Venby wrote a very good biography of de Gaulle. Richard J. Evans, one of my favorite historians of Nazi and Weimar Germany. He's actually a social rather than a diplomatic or military historian. Covered it well in the Third Reich War. I've taken stuff from the Yad Vashem website. Being a friend of the tribe, that's the first thing I thought of. Leahy's book. Murray Williamson and Alan Millett wrote a textbook that we used in grad school, Award of the One. Gerhard Weinberg, German Jewish refugee, taught at the University of North Carolina, who's a Duke.
I had the tremendous good fortune to have both Murray and Millett as my history professors.
Ohio State.
Way back in the early '90s. Again, I was like a 19-year-old undergraduate. I didn't know who these guys were at the time, but
Oh, they're superstars.
I mean, now I look back at it, it's like, it's kind of like, it's like if you're taking a class on rap music, you know nothing about rap music, and Jay-Z is your teacher, and it's kind of like, and you don't know anything about this, like, man, he seems like, it seems like Professor Murray knows a lot about this, it's like
Yeah.
the 19-year-old person, I'd never heard, but man, he seems to know a lot about this,
And taking your course on rap music, and you have Professor Combs who comes up afterwards. Can you introduce me to your girlfriend? Yeah.
Well, great figures are often not, they can be flawed human beings at the same time.
Some of them aren't even great figures. I'm thinking of, Sean Puffy Combs, Suge Knight. Yeah, problematic figures. Kanye West or whatever he's calling himself this morning. But yeah, there are a lot of great original sources, and there are documentary sources too. There's a CD-ROM that's put out by the Joint History Office, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that one of my buddies worked for the Center of Military History, gave me a copy of this. It's all the American documents from the Inter-Allied Conferences. So,
Like quadrant, sextant, like the whole.
yeah, all of them, all the American documents. So, yeah, there's a ton of resources on this.
That's great for, especially the primary source type stuff.
Yeah, and we're just talking about English language here. We're not talking about French and German. Because I can barely get by. I mean, I can order a beer in either one, but that's not, in fact, when I was in grad school, my language I had to pass the test for reading was Spanish, because I wrote my master's thesis on the ideology of the Salvadoran revolutionaries, the FMLN.
Oh, wow.
So I used a lot of Spanish there, but French and German are ones that I studied a little bit because I visited French and German-speaking countries, namely Quebec, Belgium, and Germany.
Okay.
And one day in France. Verdun. I've got to go to Verdun. But I hope you had a good time.
That's very informative, because I mean, as many people, at this particular, a little bit of history here, but the French role in this it's always kind of like that. It's like, someday I'm going to learn about that. I'll tell you all about this, but someday I'll get to learn a little about the French business, and I never, really, delved into it the way I have in other aspects of it.
And the French are kind of sensitive too, because they lost. And there was a sensitivity too after the war between the Free French and the Vichy people. Just the way they wore their beret could tell you whose side they were on. I believe it was a left-hand pull, they sided with the British. Right-hand pull, they sided with the Vichy French. I may have this wrong, I may have it backwards, God knows I've been wrong before. Sometimes just don't tell anybody, but this could start a feud. And you also had units of the French army. It's like, which side were you on? We shot at you. They even had French shooting at each other in Syria, where the British and the Free French invaded Vichy controlled Syria, and you had the French Foreign Legion having units on both sides.
That's Russia fighting the French Foreign Legion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it could get very bitter. And I think it's amazing that France was able to rebuild their army in the fifties into one of the best in the world, despite the fact that they lost two wars, Vietnam and Algeria. But it was an astonishingly good army for the fact that they started with nothing. So I think we're kind of at the end of the line here, and I thank you for coming.